Good morning everyone. It's a bit chilly this morning and a bit misty, but hopefully we'll get some good views as the mist lifts. My name's Charles. I'm a ranger for the South Downs National Park, and this is a National Park virtual walk round Lord's Peace, which is a heathen site in the National Park. If I flip the camera around, I can do that. There we go. That's where I started from. That's the car park, and the walk today will be a 2-kilometre walk, so a fairly gentle, short walk around the site, and we'll be looking at some of the interesting features of the site, some of the wildlife, some of the archaeological features. We'll talk a bit about heathland management hopefully as well, which will be good. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comment section and I'll try and answer them as we go round. As I was driving over here, I came over the top of the downs and it was bright sunshine. And as you can see, where we are at Lord's Peace, near Coates, it is shrouded in mist at the moment, but it's quite atmospheric, so we'll see how we get on. Maybe it will clear and we'll get a nice view of the downs, because there is a spectacular view from the high point as we loop round the site. Okay, let's start walking, see where we get to. So as you can see, Lord's Peace is a lowland heathland site. Now, lowland heathland sites are characterised by these dwarf shrubs, these shrubs from the Erica genus, which we more commonly call heathers. And as we move away from the car park, where it's a bit grassier because it's a popular dog walking site, so it gets a few doggy poos, which is always the best thing to do with that when you're walking around a heathen site. If you are a dog owner, is to bag them up and take them off site and dispose of them when you get home or at an appropriate bin, just because it adds nutrients to the ground, and heathland sites are special because they have very low levels of nutrients, which is what allows all the plants to thrive. So as I was saying, it's characterised by these dwarf shrubs, and here is one I'm sure you'll all be familiar with. It's ling or common heather. It's sort of gone past its flowering period. You can still see the flowers, the remnants of the flowers still on there, but in August, September it would have been a lovely purple colour all the way across the heathland. So this sort of dominates the heathland here on this lowland heathland site, and it does have a few companions. There are some other plants which are quite characteristic. You can see the gorse flowering there, which is a lovely addition to any heathen site. Really good for nesting birds, particularly heathen specialists like Dartford warblers like to make their nests and forage in gorse, because it supports lots of spiders and other insects which they feed on and enjoy. But the other heathers you'll see in this part of the world are bell heather and cross-leaved heather. Now, bell heather is quite distinctive because when it's in flower it has very deep purple, bigger flowers than ling, much more noticeable. And cross-leaved heather tends to grow in the wettest areas. So if you're in a boggy bit of heathland or you feel it's wet underfoot, then there's a good chance you'll see some cross-leaved, and it's very distinctive because of the leaf pattern. It has these whorls of 4 leaves regularly placed around the stem, very uniform and geometric. So if you take a close look at that, it becomes pretty clear that you're looking at cross-leaved. It's got lovely colours today. The bracken's all died back, so it's a beautiful orangey, rusty brown. The gorse has always got some flowers on it, which adds a bit of colour. I think they say if gorse isn't flowering somewhere in the country, then England's about to be invaded. I think that's the old saying. So if you don't see any gorse flowers, then maybe it's time to start worrying. I don't know. But going back to the site itself, lowland heathen sites, you'll see more of this as I walk around, but you can probably see the ground that I'm walking on here is, you see under there, it's sandy. I mean, it's literally got grains of sand. So the geology here is really what leads to the vegetation communities that we have. So all this heather and gorse and bilberry and other characteristic heathland species are here because of the geology, which then creates this sandy, poor, free draining soil where all the nutrients leach out, and you're left with something which can't support a huge number of species, or can only support specialist species that do really well on those kinds of really poor, free draining soils. And heather's obviously one of those plants. So if you're really into your geology, which you should be because it's really important, then you'll know that the South Downs was created, the South Downs themselves were created about 70 million years ago, when the alpine mountain building period was happening, and there was a lot of tectonic activity which pushed up this southern or southeastern portion of the country, forming the North and South Downs, which at one time were joined in a big range of hills stretching from Kent all the way down to where we are in the South Downs, and famously at the Seven Sisters and Beachy Head, a big chalk dome. And that chalk dome's gradually been peeled back since it was formed. The centre of it's been eroded, and it's exposed these other layers underneath, which are older rocks, older than the chalk. And the green sand which we're on, the lower green sand, it's one of those layers that's been exposed, and it's, as you could see earlier, it's very sandy. And that's why we've got this string of heathlands in this part of the national park, Lord's Peace being one of them, strung out along those sandstone ridges. So if you take a look at a map and you see where the heathlands are, it just follows that geology, because where you've got those underlying rocks, you get these soils which support these plants, so you get the Heathen Sites. Right, I think we might, there's a couple of ways we can go here. So Lord's Peace is open access land, which means you can walk anywhere on the site, but there are footpaths and or desire lines where people tend to go. The Serpent Trail, which is a long distance trail connecting the Heathen Sites I was talking about in the Wealden Heath area of the national park, also runs through Lord's Peace. So if you fancy doing the Serpent Trail, you can check it out on our website to find out more information and get maps and what have you. Or you can just come to one of the sites on the Serpent Trail and do a circular walk like I'm doing today and get a feel for it, and maybe do more of the trail later. But it's always best to stick to the trails as much as you can, particularly in bird nesting season, between March and September, because heathlands are known for their ground nesting birds. And if you're walking on your own or particularly with a dog, but either way, if you stray off the paths too much between those months of March and September, that can disturb the birds that are nesting, which might mean they abandon their nest, or the eggs aren't incubated properly, and then they have an unsuccessful breeding period, and those rare heathen species like woodlark, nightjar, and all those amazing species that we love about the heathlands, we'll have less of them. So yeah, really important to do that as much as possible, just so we can all protect these beautiful species that we love. Right, so you can see quite mysterious, spooky image of Lord's Peace. That ridge that I'm looking over towards is where we're going to head to, but I'm going to sort of do a loop round. I'm not going to cross straight over, I'm going to loop round, but it's quite a spectacular view today, even though we can't see very far. There's something quite nice about the mystery of it as it reveals itself in the mist. Right, we'll go past what's known as the old schoolhouse. It used to be a local school for coats. It's now a house. Probably just see it in the background as I go through here. just peeking through there. Nice historic building. Right, make our way round. So winter's obviously a good time to go for a walk, especially on a dry day, but not so great for seeing some of the heath and specialist species. But I'll talk about them nonetheless, because if you do want to come back for a walk, obviously it might be in spring or summer when there's a bit more activity going on in terms of wildlife. But the sort of real star of the show at Lord's Peace, as some of you may know if you're familiar with the site, is the field cricket, which is a small, well, I say small, it's about 2 centimetres long when fully grown, so it's not the smallest insect. It's a small flightless cricket that is one of the rarest species in the country, certainly one of the rarest invertebrate species, and it's the subject of a Back from the Brink project, and those projects are led by Natural England. This one's in partnership with the RSPB and other organisations, conservation organisations. The National Park's been involved as well. And it's about securing the future of the field cricket. The field cricket was a species which was thought to be extinct at one time in the UK, and it was rediscovered in this area. So this is really a stronghold for that species. It was rediscovered in the 70s, I believe. And it was first described by Gilbert White, the famous naturalist, over in Hampshire at Selborne. And it used to be fairly common across the heaths and acid grassland, and even on the downs, I believe, there were some on chalk sites. Before I witter on about field crickets, which I'm going to do more of, I just thought I'd show you this feature here. Now, it doesn't look like much, but if you can see the bracken over there, there's sort of a slight rise in the ground. I'll sort of point to it. You can sort of see that outline there. That's actually a bowl barrow, believe it or not, which is a funerary monument. I've got a little picture here, which hopefully, if I put this, that's what it would have looked like, believe it or not. So you can see people would have buried their dead there. Now, most of these bowl barrows, so called because they look like upturned bowls, and often the top of them are sort of sunken in where the chamber would have been. And there's no treasure, unfortunately, buried anymore. I think the Victorians have had off with all that long ago. But there's 4 scheduled ancient monuments, which are protected monuments like these, bowl barrows. And they date mainly from the late Neolithic to the late Bronze Age. So that's 2,400 to 1500 BC. And, you know, they really give you a telltale clue to the past of these heathen sites and this landscape. So people, early settlers in the Mesolithic period, would have cleared trees on these sites and ploughed the soils and grazed livestock because they were freer draining and drier. The soils were lighter, so their early wooden ploughs would have been able to handle the ground. It wasn't too heavy or too stony. And they would have settled here and used these as hunting sites and farming sites, etc. So they often have a really long history of settlement and human modification. And they only exist, these heathen sites only exist because people have settled them. So, you know, Lord's Peace is open and heathy. It has this vegetation structure because of the geology, like I talked about earlier, but also because people have cleared away the trees which would have colonised the site. And after World War II, this site was actually planted up as a pine plantation. So you can see some of the remnants of it here, some of these big, grand pine trees, which would have, historically, would have covered the entire site. and they've been cleared away in the litter layer, so all the needles and bracken and everything that would have decayed underneath the trees has been scraped back. And what you get is heathland restoration, basically. All the seeds of the heather remain in the seed bank for up to 50 years, I think they can lie dormant. And once you scrape it back, they'll germinate because they'll have more light. And you get the restoration of lowland heath. So it's an amazing habitat. And it's really great that it's been restored on this site, which is owned by Lavington Estate since the 50s. And it was restored in the early 90s. One of the earliest heathland restorations, I believe, lowland heathland restorations. So that's where we were just a few minutes ago, across the other side of the valley there. You can see in the mist. I was standing up by those trees, those tall pine trees. And the downs are over there somewhere. Believe it or not, I'll keep walking. Here's one of the lovely Scots pines that I was talking about, which is a characteristic because they were planted up after the war. But yeah, it would be colonised, if it were left to its own devices, it would be colonised by pioneer species like birch, which we can see growing in this line here. Bracken would take over, it would scrub over and essentially become secondary woodland. But because you want to preserve all those amazing species and the amazing habitat, which is incredibly rare now, lowland heath, you have to do a lot of work to keep it open. I'll talk about that in a bit. But the field cricket, I'll go back to that before I forget. So it was rediscovered here in the 70s. There's been the heath and restoration work, like I was saying, in the early 90s to make this site, return it to what it was before the war. And the project has been really successful, the Back from the Brink project, which has been running for quite a few years now. And it's involved habitat work, but also translocation, so moving small numbers of field crickets from sites like this to other sites that now have suitable habitat. And one of the key things they need is grazing, because it creates the short tussocky vegetation structure that you need for field crickets, because they need patches of warm, bare, sandy ground, but also little tussocks of vegetation to construct their burrows underneath. So they need this complex of different sward heights, and yeah, grazing cattle particularly do a really good job of providing that habitat. So they've been moved around, and they're now at a number of sites across the county and into Surrey as well, which is really great news because it's helping secure the future of this really rare, charismatic species. And the field cricket, if you're interested, they're very hard to see, and they're also protected, so I wouldn't advise disturbing them. But they make burrows, and they graze little platforms in front of the burrows where the males sit and sing in the summer and springtime. So you'll hear them calling on Lord's Peace if you come here for a walk. Late April into May, onwards into June, and they make a very distinctive call, and you'll hear it everywhere. Once you get your ear in, that you're surrounded by them once you're here at that time of year. And they'll mate, and the nymphs, as they're called, the young, will feed up over the summer period, and they'll molt about 10 times and grow a huge amount, from sort of 1 millimetre nymph to 1.5 centimetres, and then they'll overwinter underground, not hibernating, but just sort of going into a period of low activity. And then these field cricket nymphs will re-emerge in March the following year and molt a couple of other times. So there's about 12 molts in total. And just stop here and have a look at the view before I race around the site. And yeah, and then their sort of life cycle returns to the previous year. So they'll then be adults in April time, and they'll start looking for a mate, and the whole cycle starts again. So the males are the ones that sing, that you'll hear when you come out here in May time. Beautiful song that they make with their wing cases, which look like sort of complex wrought ironwork. They're golden in colour often, really beautiful. And they don't fly at all, field crickets, they just walk. So they walk around very slowly, but they can walk up to 100 metres a day. So, they get around, and they are capable of recolonising sites, but they can't move long distances because they can't fly, so they are limited to where they can walk. Yeah, so that's a really sort of unique or very unusual rare feature about Lord's Peace. It's this stronghold for that very rare species that fortunately is doing better in recent years. So that's a really good news story, I think, for nature recovery and for wildlife in the national park. So definitely come and check that out and listen to the singing field crickets if you can. You can see a few dog walkers have joined me this morning. It's a busy site for dog walking. In terms of the management, as I was saying earlier, Heathen Sites need to be managed. Lowland heath is, so you know, people often talk about upland heath and the moorlands in the north. So upland heath is above 300 metres above sea level, and anything below that in terms of heathland characterised by this, you know, these heather communities, is lowland heath, and it's really rare, lowland heath. I think the UK has over 50% of the world's resource of global heathland habitat, but 80% of it's been lost since 1800. So it's something that we really need to work hard to conserve. And just give you a view back across this ridgeline because it's quite spectacular. And only 1% of the national parks area is lowland heath, so they're real jewels in habitat and wildlife terms, and something we need to protect. So yeah, they need constant care and attention to maintain them. They're an early successional habitat, so everything sort of wants to eventually make its way to woodland through a period of sort of scrubbing over, and then eventually trees establishing themselves, and you get a closed canopy and it gets quite dark and a bit colder. And woodlands are really valuable, but we have so few of these special open habitats like heathlands that we really want to work to maintain them. So heathlands need clearance work, so every so often trees need to be cut down, often small little birch trees and pines that seed really freely and establish themselves quickly. They need to be cut down and to stop them invading the open heath. But some trees are good, and obviously they're good bird nesting habitat, and they provide a food source for other things too. So, you know, it's all about a balance, a mixture of habitats. But bare ground and open areas are increasingly unusual. So they're something we want to continually create and renew, because once you create an area of bare ground or cut down an area of trees, you know, they'll inevitably come back and it will scrub over and grow over again. So you've got to be in this constant cycle of, I'll go up this way, going off piece slightly, constant cycle of creating new open areas. That's sort of the name of the game really when it comes to heathland management. I thought I'd just take you guys over to this old sandpit that's at the bottom of Lord's Peace at the southern end of the site. There are quite a few of these around in the landscape in this part of the world, because obviously it's so sandy. It was a great place to get sand for building and other things. It's fenced off because this site is grazed by livestock, and it's also a very steep drop, so be very, very careful. But I thought it was worth showing you quickly while we're at this end of the site. A project that the National Park completed earlier this year before lockdown to open this up to clear the diseased ash trees. This is an old sandpit, and scrape the sand wall over there, as you can see, to expose some fresh sand. You might be able to just make out the dots in the distance there, and they're sand martin nesting holes, or hopefully they will be there. They've been drilled into the face, different sizes, to encourage nesting sand martins, which are present in the area, but they haven't been recorded nesting here for a long time. So the idea is to attract them here and hopefully get them nesting. and support the species. You can see here we left some standing deadwood, some of the remains of the dying ash trees, just to provide some extra habitat. And also, you might be able to see the tree tubes planting up some other species to take their place. So that's the old sandpit. So I'll make my way back onto the track. Wasn't planning on making that stop, but I thought, why not, as we're here? And now we're sort of coming to the lower part of the site, and as we drop down, you'll see that there's a pond, and wet heath is a really important and increasingly rare habitat. So any wet areas on a heathland, which in the past have been were often drained because people wanted dry land, they didn't want wet land, because they could more really easily use it for agriculture and other things, forestry. So any remaining areas of wetland on wet heath are really great for wildlife. And there's all sorts of things that you'll find around heathland ponds. There's some really specialist dragonfly species like the golden ring dragonfly, which come summer next year is something you might see buzzing around the pond at Lord's Peace, which is by the lower car park. Dragonflies do something really interesting and quite acrobatic called obelisking, which is where they, on very hot days, because they're cold-blooded, so their temperature is determined by the outside. They can't regulate it very easily themselves, like we can. Although my hands would disagree with that at the moment because they're absolutely freezing. Forgot my gloves. They will obelisk, so they will essentially do a handstand and point the tip of their abdomen to the sky, the tip of their tail as it were, up to the sky, directly to the sun. So they'll essentially align themselves. If you imagine like pointing a pencil or your finger straight in line with the sun, it's only the top of it that will be exposed to the sun. So it's a way of minimising the surface area that's being warmed. And what that does is it allows the dragonflies to cool down, or at least not get as hot as they would if they were just in a sort of conventional position. So if you ever see a dragonfly doing a handstand on a hot day, you haven't gone mad. It is a thing that happens, and it's a deliberate thing. I wouldn't recommend trying it yourself unless you're particularly agile. But yeah, you never know, maybe an effective way to cool down. We could probably learn something from the dragonflies. So this area here, as you can see, is a bit grassier, and you'll find this on some heathland sites where you get a mixture of heather and grasses mixed in, and often on heathland sites that'll be acid grassland, and it's characterised by these finer, thinner grasses, not so lush and verdant, but they have a value all of their own, and they're quite rare, even rarer than heathland itself. So these little pockets of acid grassland are really important, and something that is crucial to maintain and conserve. Right, I will just take a little detour up here, and we'll walk across to the other side. You can probably hear the dogs eager to go for their walk. As I was saying earlier, you may have heard of the National Parks Take the Lead campaign, which is about encouraging responsible dog ownership and helping the wildlife on all these special sites like heathlands to flourish. And there's really a few key messages from that. Definitely give it a Google and check it out. There's lots of useful information and resources on the National Parks website, on social media as well. Some really good videos that have been made, Take the Lead videos, which are really cool and quite amusing. But the messages really are, you know, bag it and bin it when it comes to dog poo, because like I say, these sites are really delicate and the nutrient levels are very low. So dog poo, which is high in nutrients, unlike cattle or sheep or pony poo, which is just recycled grass essentially. Dog poo is meat, a meat-rich diet, and it comes from off the site, so it's very high in nutrients and it can upset the balance on the site. So always take it home with you. And the other crucial thing is to keep your dog on the paths and on a lead between March and September, because as I was saying before, that's bird nesting season. So there are lots of ground nesting bird species on heathen sites that are particularly sensitive to disturbance. So dogs running through the heather off leads, whilst it might be great exercise for the dog, it's not great for the birds. And you know, you can get a great walk with your dog, keeping it on the paths and enjoying the site and the wildlife, because obviously ultimately we all want to enjoy these special places. So yeah, it's an important message. So here we are, here's the pond, looking very still and calm. I can see a mallard, a male mallard duck down the other side of the pond, just sitting between those two dead trees, which is lovely standing deadwood again, just like in the sandpit. And as I say, this pond will be much more active with wildlife in the spring and summer. Lots of dragonflies hunt over the pond, buzz around, so it's well worth a look. It's well worth a look at that time of year, as is the whole site as well. And just over there, you might be able to see in the distance, there's a little bridle gate. That's where the Serpent Trail crosses the site. So if you're ever out walking the Serpent Trail, and you happen to be in this part of the world, then you might cross over Lord's Peace. Right, so we're sort of doing the last corner of the triangle now. We're going up the hill and heading back to the car park where I started. It's a short walk, as I say, it's only a couple of kilometres. So it's a really good one if you haven't got much time, or you just want a relatively flat, easy walk. Most of the ground is level, where there are a couple of level changes where you go down or you go up a little slope, but they're not big. And the site where you walk is generally very dry, so as with most heathen sites, so it's quite a good one, depending on your level of mobility and you know how strenuous you want the walk to be. It's quite a nice one for different levels, and depending on how energetic you're feeling that day. So yeah, a good one to bear in mind. Right, we're coming up. I'll just pause by this rather insignificant looking bush. It's actually alder buckthorn. It's hard to tell this time of year because it's completely bare and denuded. But it has those glossy black berries at the right time of year. And it's fairly sort of, the leaves aren't serrated, they're kind of quite smooth. But the berries are sort of the giveaway, those dark berries. And it's for those butterfly enthusiasts among you, it's actually the food plant for the brimstone butterfly, which is the bright yellow one. It's often the first butterfly you'll see in a given year, emerges quite early and goes throughout the year. It has multiple broods. And it's thought to be where the name for butterfly came from. So in the medieval period, the story goes that it was called the butter-coloured fly, hence butterfly. And it is, as most people know, quite a bright yellow butterfly. It's only the males that are bright yellow. The females are a much more muted, sort of off-white yellow. Something to watch out for. So if you see alder buckthorn, then you never know, a brimstone butterfly might not be far behind. Apologies for all the sniffing. It's very cold and my nose is running, unfortunately, but yeah, I can't hold the camera and blow my nose at the same time. That sounds like too much of a challenge for me. There's another bit of alder buckthorn you might just be able to see peeking out over here. I suppose one of the other things to say about the site is the management here is primarily, as I was saying, grazing is important for the field crickets, and there are cows on here every so often, so that's another thing to be aware of if you're walking here with a dog or on your own. There's no issue, but it's always best to keep your dogs on leads around livestock, because they can cause distress to the livestock. So it's best to keep them on a lead around livestock at all times. You never know, cows or sheep could be in calf or in lamb, and it can cause them a lot of stress, and it can actually cause them to lose their lamb or calf. So it's not worth taking the risk. Always be cautious and respectful, but they're generally very friendly, and there's no issue. But they're important to keeping the vegetation open and short and tussocky for the field cricket. So just take a look back across the site. And the other thing that's done here is cutting. So there's mechanical cutting. The site is topped occasionally to create this shorter vegetation structure, which is really important for the field cricket and for other things. Otherwise, as I was saying earlier, it would scrub over, and you'd lose a lot of what makes it special. You'd lose the heathland vegetation, the heather and the low-growing shrubs and plants that are really characteristic of this kind of soil type. So it does take a lot of maintenance, don't worry. I think I lost you there for a second. I was just saying volunteers play a vital role in maintaining these sites, and they do a lot of scrub clearance work with us and other habitat creation work. So it's a really important part they play in working to conserve and enhance special sites like Lord's Peace and others. So if you want to check out volunteering opportunities, and it's a bit tricky at the moment with COVID related restrictions, but there's still volunteering available, various opportunities. So always look at the National Park website to see what's available at any given time, and do get in touch with us if you're interested. It's a great way to get into conservation as a career as well, starting with volunteering and building up your sort of knowledge and experience. I always think this tree is a rather beautiful way to finish the walk. It's a dead oak tree, but it's been left. It doesn't overhang a path or anything, so doing no one any harm, but providing some great habitat for deadwood invertebrates, which no doubt will be munching away at some of that decaying wood, as well as all the fungi and lichens and things that it will support. So this is the home stretch, really. We're just coming back up to the car park. One last thing that's worth having a look at is the amazing veteran oak tree in the car park, which is sort of a feature in and of itself. Just navigate this kissing gate without falling over, hopefully. As you can see, it's got an amazing sort of branch that extends out. Most likely over 300 years, maybe older. Just an example of an incredible veteran tree, and there's some others dotted around this area. There's another oak there and a fairly sizable chestnut as well. So yeah, really graceful and beautiful things, veteran trees, and something to keep an eye out on any walk in the national park. Keep an eye out for them. Stunning additions to the landscape, and something that needs to be protected. Right, so that sort of concludes our virtual walk around Lord's Peace. Hopefully it's been an interesting one and you've enjoyed it. There's some information here, as you can see, on the notice board, so you can find out a bit more about the species on the site, and any other sort of additional bits of information, their history and management, etc. So definitely check that out. And I hope you were inspired to come and do a walk and enjoy this amazing site. And if you get a sunny day, trust me, the views are incredible. Although I've rather enjoyed the mystical nature of it today, looking at views through the mist. It's been a different look at the site. So yeah, it's been really good. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, and hopefully some of you will be able to join us on some more virtual walks in the future. Have a good day, and catch you guys later. Cheers.